I think something that's important for us to do is to shift our perspective of rest being something that means you're lazy and you don't have good work ethic and you don't really have dreams, and shifting it into something that is actually a gift from God, and it's something that's desperately needed in our hearts to be able to be who He's called us to be. Welcome back to the podcast. We are so glad that you're joining us for this episode. It's finally March. I feel like spring is on the way, which in Colorado might not be true, but we're gonna keep believing over here. And today we wanted to talk about kind of just the importance of rest and how to find rest in your life and how to deal with some of the distractions that try to keep you from it. And just really diving into what rest really means. Because I know for me, like, I think sometimes, especially in the Christian world, we think of rest as like laziness, right? Like, oh, if you're going to be a girl boss, well, you got to hustle more than anyone else, right? And so rest is for people who don't really have dreams, right? And so I think that's kind of the mentality that starts to come over us when we're thinking about this. And yet there's so much power in finding rest, and it's so vital to who we are. And so I just want to talk about what that means.
Yeah. And I think, again, in like the Christian culture, when we talk about rest, a lot of times when we think of the Sabbath, it almost becomes another thing that just feels like, oh, another thing I have to do, and it feels like a pressure.
Right?
But when I heard this verse, I was so relieved. And it says in Mark 2:27, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And so basically what that's saying is that God made the Sabbath and that rest day for the benefit of us. It's not like we have the Sabbath for keeping a law or for just the sake of like having a specific day that you're following a tradition, but it's actually for us because rest is so important. And it's honestly just like throughout the whole scripture, God talks about how important it is to rest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It says Jesus is our Sabbath rest. And so kind of implying, kind of like how Jesus came and everyone was saying, oh, well, I don't steal. Well, do you lust after things? Oh, I don't murder. Well, do you hate your brother in your heart? Oh, I don't commit adultery, but did you lust after someone? And he kept trying to bring it back to the heart. Everyone kept trying to make it about their actions. And he was trying to be like, it's not about that. It's about your heart. I came to change your heart. And it's the same thing with rest. Everyone wants to be like, oh, well, I don't work on Sundays, or I don't, do this or that, and we turn it into another law.
Exactly. And then it's like a work.
It's another work that we're doing, right? And so God doesn't get glory when it's our own striving. And so just kind of realizing that rest is the same thing. It's supposed to come from our heart. It's supposed to be an attitude, not so much a strict rule that we have to follow or we're not a good Christian.
Yeah. And we kind of just both got back from trips. And so I took a little weekend getaway, and it wasn't super long, but it honestly did feel very relaxing. And I noticed today driving to work again that I just felt less like frustrated driving. I just felt less in a rush. And it made me realize just how important just little moments of rest, little trips away can really affect us. And like, that's why rest is so important. And rest is not just for us, but it's also like for the people in our life, because if we're just so wound up and so focused on all the stuff that so tightly wound, that's going to affect the people in our lives as well. Like, I know that in times when I'm just overwhelmed, I'm just spewing to Brian all the stuff that I have to do. Right. And so really, like, rest just like will have a positive effect on every single area of our life.
In Psalm 127, verse 2, in the New Living Translation, it says, "It is useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to his loved ones." I really like the way that...
What was that? Psalms 127, 1 through 2? That's the first I had.
Oh, okay. I guess we're thinking on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
But basically, I really liked the way that worded it, because it's like working from sun up to sundown. It's like the opposite of like the striving person. And I like how this version says anxiously working for food to eat, right? So it's not just about having a good work ethic, but it's when you're anxious and you're worried and you're striving and you're doing everything in your own strength in order to be successful or to accomplish something.
Yeah.
He says that that's in vain, that you're doing that in vain, because our success comes from God. And I think something that's important for us to do is to shift our perspective of rest being something that means you're lazy and you don't have good work ethic and you don't really have dreams, and shifting it into something that is actually a gift from God, and it's something that's desperately needed in our hearts to be able to be who He's called us to be.
Yeah, for sure. When I was thinking about this topic, it was crazy because I was like asking God about rest and everything. And this song came on because I was driving. And I don't know if any of you have heard the song Mayberry by Rascal Flatts.
Yeah.
But this
song, that always
song,
reminded me
it's
of my
amazing.
small town.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to read just the beginning of it because I literally heard this and I was like, man, okay, I have to read this. So this is what it says in the beginning of the song. Sometimes it feels like this world's spinning faster than it did in the old days. So naturally, we have more natural disasters from the strain of a fast pace. Sunday was the day of rest. Now it's one more day for progress. And we can't slow down because more is best. It's all an endless process. And I think what stuck out to me the most was, and we can't slow down because more is best. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that just does feel like the way that our culture sees things, you know, like the busier we are, we just assume that's better, you know? Yeah. Like, I think we really pride ourselves on what we do and how much we accomplish. Like, you know, oh, I never take my PTO. And I think like how
are you doing? I'm busy.
And I think people expect that, like, you know, even though it's not great, like it's not like a good experience, it's almost like a badge of honor for us, you know? And so I think just realizing that, you know, even though we're doing more and we're getting more done, that's actually not always a good thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like what you said. It made me think of like when you go to people's Instagram bios and it's like, you know, it's like mom, wife, oh, that's wonderful. Like, you know, like business owner, you know, a 7-figure CEO, like, and it just
how
keeps
much stuff
going.
Can you list?
And then it says like, see more. And then there's like more. And then it's like, I do this. I made this much money last year. And usually they're sharing it because they help other people do the same thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's wrong to be successful, but notice what we choose to say in our bio. Notice what we choose to say about ourselves really shows where our identity is and what we think brings value. Like you said,
exactly.
Like we think the more success, the more things we do, the more things we accomplish in the natural adds to our value as a human being. And that's going to be an endless cycle because it will never be enough.
Exactly. Like it really is tied to our identity. And I think it starts at a super young age, you know, like parents, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing to want your kids to be in activities and everything, but when we're a kid, you know, if we're getting great grades on every test, that means we're putting in a lot of work to study, you know, and if we have more extracurricular activities, that's better. And it's all these things that like we're rewarded for how much we're accomplishing and how much we're doing. And so it kind of not only creates this feeling of more is better, but like a normal amount of work and getting rest is bad. It's like, and I think it's gotten a little better in our culture, but like thinking about someone who's like, oh, you know, I can't do this tonight. I'm trying to get a little sleep. It's like, well, what, you know, I feel like it's kind of questioned sometimes of when people put boundaries up to protect their rest and to protect their time, you know, it's kind of looked down upon.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes, you know, there are seasons to our lives. So, you know, a new parent with a newborn might not get as rest as someone like me who has no kids. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're stripping your responsibilities.
Yeah.
God will give you that supernatural grace to take care of the season that you're in. But kind of taking stock, kind of like last week we talked about taking stock of our priorities and what's in our priorities right now that needs to be and what doesn't need to be. Kind of looking at the amount of rest we're getting, because that should be one of our priorities. And if you're not getting it, then what are some things that you can do to make sure that you do get it? And just kind of thinking about the season that you're in and realizing, okay, if I'm trying to do this in my own strength, God is not obligated to bless it. So I need to make sure that I'm walking in the rhythm of the grace that he has granted me in this season and finding out what that is.
Yeah. Like you said, there are going to be seasons in life where sometimes we just aren't going to be able to get that physical rest that we're wanting. You know, like work is going to be a lot and the stuff going on in our life. But I think that honestly, in seasons like that, it makes us rely a little bit more on God, you know, and it makes us rely more on his strength. And also, like we just had an episode about this, but it helps us realign our priorities a little bit. So I was also thinking about that verse that talks about laboring to rest. And, like I was saying, there's going to be times in our life where we just can't physically get all the rest that we're wanting. Like, especially like you mentioned, like having a new kid, having a season in your work that's just more busy than normal. And so I was kind of thinking about just this idea of laboring to rest and how sometimes we're going to have to put a little bit more work on the front end, but that'll pay off later down the road. And something I thought about too with this is like marriage, because Brian and I, we've kind of just been like reading marriage books and stuff like that, like listening to marriage podcasts, like right when we got married, and we still try to do that today. And sometimes we're very busy in life and it's like, oh, well, we don't really have time for this. But what the hope is that when we're putting time into something like our marriage right now, it'll help us down the road from, like troubles to come. And then this is like
inevitable troubles to come.
Yeah.
To Brian and Felicia's marriage.
Hopefully not troubles to come.
Right.
But another thing I thought about, which is a little bit more nerdy, but I was thinking about SOPs. What SOPs?
This is your world. This is not my world. I don't.
SOPs, what do they stand for?
System
operating procedures or something?
I don't know. I dislike this stuff so much.
Well,
I'm like, SOPs, I'm not doing this right now.
Jessica's going to take a break. I'll explain to you my point.
Be back here.
But with the SOPs, it's just basically creating a document of all of the stuff that you do for a specific process, right? And a lot of times before you would leave a position, they would ask you to create these SOPs for the people coming. And what that does is it basically keeps you from having to reteach that same thing to every single person. They'll just have a document and they can learn it. So kind of just my main point with that is sometimes it will take a little bit more work in certain seasons so that you can rest, like laboring to rest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like what you said about kind of like sowing the seeds now for a harvest later.
Yeah.
And I think something that's not honored in our culture today is the aspect of rest. And we've got a generation, probably several generations now, of people growing up not honoring rest and being taught to honor rest. And we don't even know what effect that's going to have on our bodies in the future. I was doing, I like to do bar for my workout. And I do like my bar workouts here. And in them, a lot of times we're doing these like movements and they're very like ballet focused and very much on like strength, but also flexibility. And she'll talk about, does that upset you? I have access to the same workout.
I did. No, why I'm shaking my head is because I did one of those workouts and it was so hard. I did the first one.
It's kind of a shock to your system when you first do it because you're doing like ballet moves and your body's like, I don't move that way. But it does. But see, that shows the flexibility. And that'll get better and better and better.
For sure, yeah.
But that's actually a good point because in it, she talks about we'll be doing a certain move and she's like, yes, we want shredded abs. Yes, we want, tight toned bodies, but we do this move so that we can have our original hips when we're 80 years old. And I'm like, oh, really? And so I'm doing this move, I'm helping my hips and then I'm helping my spine and then I'm helping my, I realize all the things that I'm investing in my body that aren't just physical physique, but more long-term investment so that I can have, a healthy body and be able to move freely when I get older. And it's the same thing with rest. We take vitamins and supplements to take care of ourselves, but what are we doing for our rest and our mind and our bodies to give ourselves rest so that when we get older, we don't have all these problems with our bodies and with our minds because of a lack of rest, because we spent our lives so anxious and stressed out.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of this is, related to physical rest and how we can kind of change up our life and, recategorize our priorities and stuff like that. But also another aspect of rest is that mental rest, that rest for your soul. And I realize that if we aren't resting mentally and emotionally, even if I'm sitting on the couch for a week straight and I have just complete time off of everything, if I'm worrying about things, if I'm worrying about my future and everything like that, like that's still not going to be rest at all. Like it's not going to be mental rest, but it's also not going to be physical rest, because our bodies and our minds are so connected that every single worry and every single thought that you're having that's worried about the future and everything, it's going to, your body's going to get those signals and it's going to feel like it's still in a state of work, So maybe just ask God, like, what is it on your heart right now that's keeping you from getting true rest?
So in Lisa Bevere's book, Kiss the Girls Made 'Em Cry, it's a really, really good book. It was one of her earlier ones. She shares the story of Sleeping Beauty, and she kind of adds her own little tale to it. And she's making a very different point than I'm about to make, but I remember reading this rendition of it, and this one thing stuck out to me, and this was actually years ago, and it's always stayed with me since, and it has to do with rest. So I'm going to read it to you. And this is coming in at the time when the prince finally faces off with the dragon, and he comes to the tower, and that's where we pick up. He kicked open the door. Inside, the air was still and stale and thick with dust. He mounted the winding staircase to her tower chamber, passed through the door, opened the window, and with a motion dispelled the darkness. Golden light spilled onto her sleeping figure. While she waited, she had neither soiled nor aged. Her time of waiting had served her well, and she had become more beautiful in her rest. The prince walked closer, still breathing hard from the battle, but when he paused a moment to look at her in rest, she was breathtaking. That always stuck out to me, the part about while she waited, she neither soiled nor aged. Her time of waiting served her well, and she became more beautiful in her rest. There's a lie of the enemy that says if you rest, life will pass you by, right? He wants you to stay busy. He wants you caught up in this cycle of busyness and stress and anxiety and worry and trying to compare yourself to what everyone else is doing, trying to accomplish someone else's vision so you're too tired to accomplish your vision. And you can really see this in how our world portrays women right now. Women are absolutely amazing. Like, we can raise babies and start companies. I mean, women are incredible. But something that is God-given in women, I believe, is the ability to be at rest and to make other people feel comfortable to be at rest.
That's true.
That's why we're very naturally very hospitable, and we welcome people into our home. We nest, right? We create homes that are comfortable and where people feel like, oh, I can just relax here. I can be myself here. It's a God-given trait. Doesn't mean men don't have it too, but I think women have like a special gift from God when it comes to this. And yet in our world today, the modern feminist movement and all kinds of things, really the enemy is trying to say that no, like we've been saying, the more you do, the more value you have. And if you rest, someone else is going to pass you by, and then you're going to be a nobody and everyone's going to forget you. And so I think it's really just amazing to see that if you actually choose rest and choose godly rest, then it's not going to take away from your life. You're not going to get behind. It's actually going to add to your life. It's going to add to your soul. It's going to add to your mind, and it's going to help you actually become the person that God created you to be.
That's amazing. Like, I feel like the thing that I strive for, one of the things I strive for the most in life as far as like qualities about myself, and something that I hope to be more like when I get older, is the ability to like make people feel more comfortable, and to create atmospheres that make people feel like they can relax and rest. Beautiful that is not only what we're good at, but also the desire that God puts in a lot of us. It's like, this is what you want to do because God created you to be like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it doesn't mean that you can't, be a CEO or start a business or hustle and work full time. It doesn't mean that. But just like what we talked about earlier, how Jesus didn't come to tell you to do this and not do that. He came to change your heart. That's kind of what this rest thing is coming from. There's a difference between two women who are doing the same high-paying job, let's say, and one is anxious and stressed out and always feeling like she has to prove herself, and the other is completely at rest and can have her focus on you and making you feel special and valued in that moment. Who do you want to spend more time around, right? And it's amazing because it's actually our way of portraying God's character to the world and to the other people in our lives. And that's only going to happen when you have a heart at rest. This world is longing to see women who are completely confident in themselves themselves and at rest in their souls, because it gives them permission to feel peace and to feel joy and to feel love straight from the heart of God.
Yeah, and so this isn't biblical necessarily. I've heard, I'm like, so we're not going to be biblical. No, this is just something I heard, and I really like the symbolism of it. But I've heard before that like women are like the Holy Spirit character traits of God, and men are like the Father traits of God, because like women are really good. And again, not saying men aren't, but women are really good at like being the comforter and being like that, that calm stillness.
I mean, when you hurt yourself as a kid and you skin your knee, who do you go to?
Exactly.
Dad or mom, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I knew who to go to when I wasn't feeling well. I knew where I was going to get sympathy, and where my dad would make me, if I stayed home because I was sick and legitly sick, my dad would have me stand up and quote scripture around the house. And so he was also very loving and very kind. So it wasn't bad, but I also knew where to go to get
like if you're wanting specific qualities, you go to men my mom, or women. And like you said, that doesn't mean women can't be, all those things like CEOs, firefighters, whatever it is. But I think that even in those positions, we're going to bring a little bit something different to the table than a man would in those same positions. So I could talk about this forever.
And you don't have to be physically still to be at rest in your heart.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of the point, is it's not about not doing a lot. It's not about physically being still and just walking around and talking like this all the time. That's not what we're talking about. It's about a heart that's at peace and at rest because she knows who she is. And when you know who you are, then other people feel like they can be themselves in your presence.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, I'm going to ask Felicia a question before she tells me that she's going to do the first one. So,
okay, getting back at me.
I'm getting back at you for last week. All right, so talking about rest.
Okay.
We mentioned that we just went on vacation. You super recently just got back yesterday. So tell me, when you're on vacation and you're trying to get this rest, how do you fight against distractions to that rest when they come? Whether it's physical or probably more like mental distractions to think about work or to start stressing about everything again.
That's really good. I feel like it's hard for me to think about that in other areas because honestly, when I'm on vacations and if I'm really relaxed, a lot of the things that usually trouble me and a lot of the stuff that feels like all these things I have to do just fade away, which is wonderful. Very nice. But I think you can do certain practical things to protect yourself, like, work emails and stuff like that. I think it's tempting for some people to just be still checking their work and, making sure that there's nothing coming through. So kind of just putting those limits around you and realizing that we are responsible for how much we're going to give to other people when we're supposed to be resting. Another area of my life where I feel like it's very restful is when I take my bubble baths. I feel like I talk about my bubble baths so much on here.
It's a common topic on this podcast.
It's a common topic. But one thing I do when I get in my bubble bath is I actually put my phone on airplane mode so that I don't get texts because I read my stories on my phone.
Ah, yes.
So this is kind of just more practical. But just like protecting yourself from being able to, take all these new stresses on and help people and all this stuff.
And I would say for me too, I can put all those boundaries up, but it's my thoughts, it's my mind that will start thinking, oh, did I do that? Did I do that? Or, oh, when I get back, I need to do this, this, and this. And I think for me, what helps is I have a little notes app, and if I think of something I need to do when I get back, I'll just write it down. And then it gives my mind permission to kind of forget it. But like you said, just kind of being on top of it with, if I notice I'm getting distracted in my mind and I'm starting to think about work or stress or things that I need to kind of have a break from, just kind of like fighting those negative thoughts. It's like just fighting those stressful thoughts and just replacing it with, no, I'm going to be present in this moment, and just realizing that it's a constant walk you have to take.
Would you consider doing work that you love getting rest?
No.
Okay. And I was specifically thinking for you, like your vlogs.
Yes. So I'm very passionate about what I do. I love what I do for the ministry we work for. It is video producing. So it's very similar to this, even though I'm not on it. But I love video producing. I love doing this podcast. And then I also have a YouTube channel where I work on vlogs.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
So I do a lot of stuff, and I'm still figuring out the balance of all that. I definitely haven't found it yet. But I think sometimes there is the mentality of, oh, I love it, so I can just do this all the time.
Yep.
And it's fine. And when I do that, I burn myself out to the ground. So absolutely not. I think it's a good thing, and it does give me life. I usually work on my stuff kind of early in the morning before my full-time job. Sometimes I work on it at night, and I love it. I work on it on the weekends. I'm not just like, oh, gotta stop and have 5 hours of rest time. I don't need that. I like doing these things. They give me a sense of life that my full-time job doesn't give me in other areas. And so I think it's okay to pursue your dreams and give extra time to it. But I have to make sure that I'm also giving myself time where I'm not producing. I'm not, being a content creator. I'm not putting forth creative energy. Because in order to put forth creative energy, you have to put it in. It's just like with writing. One of the things that my job requires me to do a lot of is writing. And we always tell our team, I always say, if you want to, this is actually a quote from an author, so I can't take credit for it, but they say, if you want to have good writing come out, you have to put good writing in. So what are you reading? What stories are you reading? You need to be reading books if you want to be a writer. And so kind of that same concept of, if you want something to come out of you, you have to be putting it in. It's like our spiritual walk. You need to put the word in. But also you need to put other things in. I love reading books. I read a lot of times.
Yeah.
I love taking baths as well. That's something that I do as well. And there's just a lot of different things I do where I'm not being a content producer. Like, I'm not producing something and putting it forth. I'm just allowing things to come into me.
Exactly.
And bring me rest. And that's super, super important. And I don't think working on your dreams necessarily replaces that time of rest.
That just made me realize that I think a lot of the rest is like input versus output.
Yeah.
And I never thought about it like that before until you said that.
That makes sense.
But like the other day, I was like, okay, I'm getting physical rest, so let me just take this time to make a list of the stuff that I need to do. And I thought that because I'm going to say, in my bubble bath, I didn't want to mention where I was because I talked about it too much already.
The holy bubble bath?
Yeah. Bubble bath. I was like, okay, this is super relaxing for me, and I do need to figure out what I need to do, so let me just make this list. And it was a whole different experience because usually I'm just taking in like books and stories that I love.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good point. It's like, what are you putting stuff out? Because that is work, even if you love it, versus just allowing yourself to take stuff in.
Exactly. And it can be hard because, for what I do, and I'm sure it's similar for you, I get ideas all the time. So it's kind of like you want to write them down. You want to go off that train of thought. But something that helps me, especially if I know I really need to like let my mind rest, I will put something on that kind of helps me relax. So sometimes in the bubble bath, I'll put on a podcast, not necessarily a self-help podcast, but like there's a lot of podcasts that I listen to. You would not like them.
Are they murders?
They're like spooky stories, mysteries, things like that.
Terrible.
Ew, oh my God, what is wrong with you? Well, I'm not offended, but anyway, but what I'm saying is it's not something that's like, oh, okay, to be a better person, I need to do this,
exactly, because that's like, not relaxing.
No, it's not relaxing. I'm like, I'm so behind. I need to get out of this bath right now.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just purely for fun and entertainment. It feeds my soul. You need to do things that feed your soul. And on that note, my next question is literally about that.
Oh,
and
no,
so before I say too much, I want to ask it.
Oh, God.
But it's basically like, okay, we both went on vacation and that's a great time. But what are some ways that you are able to find that rest, that soul feeding time in your everyday, as opposed to just when you go on a great vacation?
Is this specific for me or is this general?
This is, well, I'd say for you.
For me?
Yeah, ideas you have for like what you would do. Because I started sharing mine.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like,
I mean, baths are one.
I know. I'm like, I'm not going to say baths because I do that all the time.
Bubble baths.
Painting. I love painting. I'm not a good painter, but painting is super relaxing for me.
See, it would be really stressful for me because I would want it to look perfect. I'm very much like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And it would be very hard for me to relax while painting.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, because for some people it might be very relaxing, but if it doesn't relax you, don't do it.
That's true. Don't do it. Let's see. Another thing would be like, I guess like video games, like to a certain extent, because I'm not a gamer.
Animal Crossing.
I'm not a gamer, but like specific things like Mario Kart and stuff like that is really fun. I don't know. I feel like there's a long list of stuff I could name, but there's a good bit, and it makes me think about like the fact that 95%, maybe a little less than that, but a lot of our life, most of our life is happening in the days that we are, in the middle of a work week, and we did just spend that time, and we did just commute, and we do need to make dinner. And so it is just so important to have those things that make you feel restful. Another thing for me is like listening to music, literally just listening to it, like watching YouTube videos and music videos on YouTube. I don't know, lots of stuff.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love reading, and I mean reading for fun,
Oh, yeah.
Not nonfiction, even though I like some nonfiction, but reading, journaling, starting the day with scripture really helps me too, because then when I start getting stressed out, I kind of have something to think about and meditate on throughout the day.
Yeah.
Gardening, we're getting close to that.
That's a huge one. Yeah, it's been a while since I did that.
Colorado, it's not a year-long thing.
It's not here. I'm so excited.
It's like a few months, but
being outside is so therapeutic.
I love being outside, and I love growing things. I did it really for the first time last summer, and I'm really excited to do it again. But that was very therapeutic, to like take care of something and watch it grow. It got my mind off of the stress of work or whatever I was going on through, and really helps. And then cooking with a podcast, because like I said, if I don't have something to distract my brain, sometimes it goes to thoughts of work. And so I love cooking, but I love having like a podcast or a YouTube video on while I cook. And then that really helps me kind of unplug. Even though I'm listening, it's like I'm unplugging from everything. And then also I would say like working out for me, it's one of those things that it's not like I just look forward to it. I'm not one of those people. I'm not like, oh, I live to work out. It's like usually really hard for me to make the decision to work out that day, even though I've technically decided I'm going to work out all these days, whatever. But when I actually do it, there's something that your body releases when you do physical activity and you work out, for example. And then there's been so many times when Jeff and I have been so stressed about something, and then we both go do a workout, or one of us will, and you come back and you're just like, man, I don't know why I was so stressed out. Everything's going to be fine. And it just releases these chemicals in your brain that you're meant to have. And it allows you to kind of release some of that stored up energy and stress. And then you realize that, you know what, I just needed to move my body a little bit. So
that's huge.
It's important to have these little things throughout every single day. Every day you should be feeding your soul and finding rest, and not just waiting for the big vacation to come. Exactly. Even if it's just 20 minutes with a book, right? Just something that brings you joy and feeds your soul.
Absolutely. I did this recently, but something that might be helpful is to make a list of everything that you love, and then you can figure out from there, like what should I spend a little bit more time on? Like I recently made a list, and some of the things that I realized that I love doing is like making music playlists and stuff. And that's not something
making
playlists. Like one of my dreams would be to make soundtracks for movies and stuff. So
like to do the composing, or
but like putting together music that already exists.
Okay.
Not that I've been making. I tried music theory class. That was rough. But like putting together stuff. So just like, okay, what can I spend a little bit more time on throughout my week that I love to do, that I really just don't ever give time to? Yeah, exactly.
It gives you something to look forward to. Like I realize that I do better in the mornings with work. So I do a lot of my creative side work in the morning before my full-time job. And then that way I might do a little bit after work, but then I kind of have the evening to look forward to my book, or to look forward to something that I'm giving myself as a treat. And then even though you're doing other things to get through the day, you have something to look forward to, and it just helps you. Kind of like when you're looking forward to a vacation, like you kind of overlook a lot of the stresses in your life. You're like, oh, I'm about to go on vacation.
Yeah,
it's like,
just one more day.
One more day. But yeah, you kind of give yourself those moments throughout the day. It's going to really help the negativity and the feeling of overwhelm that comes with getting really stressed out. And then it's going to give you more balance and more rest in your life.
For sure. So let us know below specific things that you love to do that makes you feel restful, because I might take some tips from that.
Absolutely. I always need more. I like to mix it up. So
Yeah.
let us know. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that this episode encouraged you and gave you some practical tips on how you can get some more rest in your life. If you enjoyed it, then please like it and subscribe to the podcast so you can see all of our episodes coming every single Wednesday.
And make sure to check us out on Instagram and Facebook. Until next week, remember
to have courage
and be kind.